My own son looked me in the eye and said, "You'd be nothing without me." That moment didn't just break my heart, it cracked something deeper. It made me realize how easily love can turn into ownership, and how silence can become a weapon sharper than betrayal itself. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream, it lingers. It eats away at your confidence, your dignity, until one day you look in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back. That's where this story begins, not with anger, but with awakening. Because sometimes, losing everything isn't the end, it's the start of remembering who you really are. Before we dive into today's story, I recommend you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. If you enjoy this video, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0 to let me know how I can make better content for you. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. I wake up before the sun, the way I always have. The house creaks when the furnace kicks on, and the smell of coffee fills the kitchen. Outside, the maples along the street have turned to gold, their leaves skimming across the driveway like slow sparks. My bungalow isn't much. 1 story, 2 bedrooms, a garage that used to smell of tar and sawdust. But it's mine. I built the porch railing myself last spring, even though my son told me to just hire someone off an app. I told him men who built roofs their whole lives don't need apps to hold a hammer. I'm 62 now, a retired roofing contractor from Dayton, Ohio. 4 years ago, after a small heart scare, I sold the business to a former foreman and promised Grace, my late wife, I'd slow down. She's been gone 5 years, but I still keep her hammer on the shelf by the window. The wooden handle is smooth where her fingers once rested when she helped me line shingles on our first house. That hammer keeps me honest. It reminds me that sweat and steel means something in a world made of code and screens. My son, Parker, lives 1,000 miles away in Austin, Texas. He founded some financial tech company called Northline Ledger. Every article calls him a visionary disruptor. To me, he's still the kid who once fell off the barn roof trying to impress a girl. He wears suits that cost more than my truck, talks about seed rounds and burn rates like they're seasons of the year. I don't understand half of what he says, but I listen anyway. That's what fathers do. We talk on the phone once or twice a week. Mostly, he's multitasking, typing, while telling me he's listening. He brags about clients in Singapore or new investors from Silicon Valley. I nod into the receiver, even though he can't see it, and say I'm proud of him. I am proud, but there's something else under it, like a loose nail you can't see but keep hearing rattle. A year ago, Parker mailed me a platinum card and said it would simplify things. He'd connected my old checking account to some family system he created through his firm. "You'll never have to worry about bills again," he said. I tried to protest, but he laughed. "Dad, this is progress." I told myself it was kindness. Still, every month the envelopes from the bank grew thinner, and the emails about shared management grew longer. Sometimes the system sends me alerts that say, "Your balance has been optimized." I don't even know what that means. Most days are quiet. I read the paper on the porch, fix what's broken, and drive my F-150 to the hardware store just to talk to people who still use real tape measures. At the church, I help repaint the fellowship hall, and the pastor thanks me like I've donated a wing. Friends ask if I'm proud of my son, the big tech man down south. I smile and tell them I am, though I notice they never ask if I'm happy. Evenings stretch longer now. After dinner, I sit in the living room with the television muted, watching the news crawl by without sound. Sometimes I play old home videos, Grace laughing behind the camera while Parker, no older than 8, helps me paint the fence. "Straight lines, son," I told him back then. He made a mess, but I never cared. Lately, I wonder if he remembers those summers, the smell of wood stain and cicadas buzzing through the heat. The bungalow needs new gutters before winter. When I mentioned that to Parker, he said, "Dad, just hire a maintenance service. You're not 20 anymore." Maybe not, but I'm not helpless either. Independence is a muscle. Once you stop using it, it weakens fast. I notice that truth every time my hands ache from tightening bolts or hauling mulch. Pain, at least, is proof I'm still working. Sometimes I drive by the old warehouse where my company used to be. The new owner painted over the sign that said Reeves Roofing and Restoration, but I can still see the outline through the paint, like a ghost that refuses to fade. I don't stop. There's no point. Yet I can't help slowing down when I pass. That place built more than roofs. It built me. Tonight, the air smells of rain. I sit by the window with Grace's hammer in my lap, tracing the small dent she once made by missing a nail. Parker's voice echoes in my head, sharp and impatient. Dad, you worry too much about the past. Maybe he's right, or maybe the past is the only thing holding up the rest of us. Out on the porch, the wind shakes the gutters loose again, tapping the siding in a steady rhythm like a reminder. Some roofs hold longer than others. I whisper it aloud, just to hear how it sounds in an empty house. Then I set the hammer back on the shelf and switch off the light, telling myself tomorrow I'll tighten that gutter. There's still work left to do. If you're still watching and feel the tension building, drop a number 1 in the comments. Something tells me this is only the calm before everything shatters. The call came early, before the morning sun had burned the frost off the grass. Parker's name flashed across my phone, and for a second I hesitated. He never called before 9 unless it was business. Morning, Dad, he said, his voice clipped, brisk, efficient. I could hear typing in the background, the faint murmur of an assistant giving him data. I just need your quick signature on a few forms, simple asset adjustments. It's all automated, nothing to worry about. I balanced the phone between my shoulder and ear while pouring coffee. What kind of adjustments? I asked. Just liquidity management, he replied, sounding annoyed I didn't understand. Your house and retirement accounts are still technically under your name, but we're consolidating for tax protection. It'll keep everything streamlined in case something happens to you. He said it so easily, in case something happens to you, like he was discussing a spreadsheet, not his father. I sipped my coffee, staring at the worn kitchen counter Grace had insisted on keeping, a little chip in the laminate catching the light. You sure this is necessary? Dad, please, he said with a laugh that didn't sound like laughter. You don't have to get bogged down in legal talk. I've got you covered. Just sign the form. I'll send the link. The link arrived within seconds, clean, professional, with his company's logo and a button labeled Authorized Transfer. I hesitated, reading through words I didn't fully grasp. Temporary estate guardianship, trust administration, digital verification. Parker's voice played in my head. It's just administrative. I clicked and signed. That afternoon, I printed the document for my records, a habit no one in Parker's world would understand. On the third page, beneath layers of legal jargon, I noticed a line that made my stomach twist. All assets will be temporarily managed by Northline Ledger in the event of cognitive or health decline, as determined by the managing partner, Parker Reeves. I didn't know what anger felt like at 62 until that moment. It wasn't fire, it was a cold tightening in the chest. A few days later, Linda Barker stopped by. She was Grace's old friend and my informal legal translator whenever I got lost in paperwork. She wore her usual gray cardigan and smelled faintly of peppermint. Tom, she said, settling into the chair across from me, were you aware your property is listed under a trust management filing this month? I blinked. A what now? I was reviewing the county property database for another client and saw your address. It's registered to Northline Ledger Holdings. My throat went dry. That's my son's company. She frowned. Then maybe it's a misunderstanding. But you should know that filing gives the managing partner full control in case of, well, in case you're deemed unfit. Her words landed like nails through wood. I didn't tell her about the form. Didn't tell her I'd signed it myself. When she left, I sat at the table long after her taillights disappeared, staring at the paper copy of that document. For the first time, I wondered if my own son saw me as a liability. A week later, Parker arrived unannounced. His electric SUV glided into the driveway like a spaceship landing on my lawn. He stepped out wearing a tailored suit, flashing a smile polished for investors. "Dad," he said, arms wide, as if distance hadn't stretched a year between us. Inside, he dropped his designer bag on the couch and connected his laptop before even asking how I was. Calls buzzed, emails pinged. My living room turned into a temporary boardroom. Over dinner, between phone calls, he unveiled his latest project. "I'm upgrading your house," he announced, sliding a folder toward me. "Smart systems, solar roof, full remodel, part of the Reeves Legacy Initiative." I laughed once, thinking it was a joke. "My roof's just fine." He didn't laugh back. "Dad, this is branding. A tribute to Mom, even. We'll feature the remodel in our company's philanthropy report." Something about the word branding made my stomach twist again. Grace wasn't a logo. When I told him I wasn't interested, he leaned back, crossing his arms. "You can't live like this forever. You need structure, care, safety. You can't live without me handling things." His tone wasn't cruel, just certain, which somehow made it worse. I said nothing. He mistook my silence for agreement. "Good," he said, packing his laptop. "I'll start the transfer paperwork tomorrow." After he left, the house felt foreign, as if he'd taken something invisible with him. The faint trace of his cologne lingered in the air, a smell too sharp for a place like this. While cleaning the table, I found a printed sheet he'd forgotten, a project proposal stamped with his company letterhead. Phase 1, Reeves Residence, Demolition and Reconstruction. I sat down hard, the paper trembling in my hands. He wasn't protecting me, he was erasing me. The hammer was still on the shelf by the window. I looked at it for a long time before whispering, "We'll see who can't live without who." If you're still here, comment number 2 below, because what looks like trust right now is about to turn into the sharpest kind of betrayal. The first sign something was wrong came on a gray Thursday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table, paying bills the way I always did, with coffee, paper statements, and the same fountain pen I'd used since 1985. When I tried to schedule my utility payment, the screen flashed, "Transaction failed." I frowned, tried again, same result. The message at the bottom read, "Account access restricted. Please contact your financial administrator." Administrator? That was new. After 3 attempts, I called the bank. The hold music felt endless. Finally, a young voice answered. "Mr. Reeves, yes, I see the issue. Your checking account has been migrated into a managed family trust under Northline Ledger. For security reasons, we're unable to process direct payments without authorization from your trustee." "Trustee?" I repeated, my voice low. "That's my son's company. You're telling me I can't access my own money?" A pause. Then softly, "Technically, sir, your trust manager, Mr. Parker Reeves, has full authorization." The words landed like a hammer to the chest. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the old coffee rings on the table. My son, my own flesh and blood, had taken control of everything without even asking. I called him immediately. No answer. Straight to voicemail. I tried again, same thing. By noon, I'd left 4 messages. When my phone finally buzzed, it wasn't a call, it was a text. "Don't worry, Dad. Consolidating accounts is just standard practice. You'll thank me later. No, love you. No, call me if you're confused. Just business." I stared at the message until the letters blurred. The man who once begged me to teach him how to hold a hammer now spoke to me like a client he barely tolerated. By afternoon, I was driving to the bank myself. The branch manager, a polite kid with perfect hair, greeted me with that look young people reserve for the elderly, respectful but distant. When I explained my situation, he tapped at his keyboard, frowning. "Sir, I'm afraid your accounts have been transferred to Northline Ledger's digital custody platform. We don't have access to modify or override those controls anymore." "I never agreed to this," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. He hesitated, lowering his voice. "Sir, between you and me, your file is tagged with a protective oversight note. Usually that's applied to clients with cognitive or financial risk factors. It means your son's company believes you need help managing funds. The room spun for a second. Protective oversight. That's what they called it when a man was too weak to handle his own life. I thanked the kid, walked out, and sat in my truck for a long time without starting it. Rain drummed lightly on the windshield. I thought about Grace, about how she'd told me once that Parker's mind moved too fast for empathy. I'd called that ambition back then. Now it felt like arrogance with a necktie. I drove to the diner out of instinct, not hunger. Ray Martinez was already there, hunched over his coffee like always. "You look like someone stole your dog," he said when he saw me. "Worse," I muttered. "My son stole my bank account." He whistled low. I told him everything, about the signature, the trust, the frozen payments. Ray shook his head slowly. "That boy's running your life like a business portfolio." I almost laughed, but the truth hit too close. Ray leaned forward. "You talked to Linda about this yet? She's sharp. She's helped old guys like us who signed the wrong papers before." I nodded slowly. Maybe I should. Back home, the silence felt heavier than usual. I poured myself a whiskey, the cheap kind Grace used to complain about, and sat at the desk where I kept my papers. The contract Parker had sent was still there, folded neatly in its envelope. I flattened it out under the lamp, reading every line like a man looking for landmines. That's when I saw it, small print buried near the bottom. Any objection to trust management may be interpreted as grounds for medical evaluation of the trust holder's competence. I read it 3 times. If I fought him, he could legally claim I was unstable. My son had built a trap so airtight I couldn't even protest without proving his point. For the first time in years, I felt real fear. Not the kind that hits during storms on the roof or hospital stays, but a colder kind, the fear of becoming invisible. The clock ticked past midnight before I moved. I gathered the papers, slid them into a manila folder, and wrote "For Linda" in block letters. Then I set it on the table beside Grace's hammer. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. I stared at my reflection in the glass-lined face, tired eyes, and something else behind them. Not defeat, calculation. "You wanted control, son?" I said quietly to the empty room. "Let's see what happens when the old man starts reading the fine print." The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, but solid, like the first nail in a new frame. If you're still watching, leave a number 3 in the comments. Secrets are starting to surface, and once they do, there's no turning back. Linda's office sat at the edge of town, in what used to be an old craftsman house. The shingles on the roof were my own work, back from the days when she was just starting out and couldn't afford a contractor. Inside, the place smelled of lemon oil and paper, a comforting scent in a world that now reeked of technology and plastic. She looked up when I came in, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. "Tom," she said softly, eyeing the manila envelope clutched in my hand. "You look like you've been chewing nails." "I might as well have," I said, handing her the folder. "My son's managed to turn my life into a spreadsheet." She spread the papers across her oak desk, scanning each page with the kind of focus that made me remember why Grace had trusted her with everything from wills to bake sale contracts. The only sound was the steady hum of the ceiling fan. When she finally looked up, her face had changed, calm but tight with controlled anger. "Parker's not stupid," she said. "This is airtight, legally speaking. You gave him digital power of attorney when you signed that trust transfer. On paper, he's protecting you. In reality," she tapped a paragraph with her pen, "he's building a cage and calling it a safety net." I leaned back, rubbing the ache from my neck. "So, what do I do? File a complaint?" She shook her head. "Not yet. He's covered every angle. If you fight too soon, he could claim you're showing signs of incompetence. Then a court might actually side with him." "So, I just sit here and take it?" "No," she said, her voice firm. "You play along. Make him believe you're harmless. Let him think you've accepted the leash. Meanwhile, you start keeping records. Everything he says, every document he touches. If he's manipulating your estate, we'll find it. The idea tasted bitter, but it made sense. Pride had gotten me into this. Patience might get me out. For the next few weeks, I did exactly what Linda advised. I smiled during Parker's calls, nodded when he talked about portfolio alignment, and pretended not to notice when he referred to my home as an underutilized asset. I kept my answers short, polite, rehearsed. When he laughed at my flip phone, I laughed too. Behind the scenes, I began rebuilding pieces of my independence. I paid for groceries in cash, saving the receipts in a shoebox under the sink. I reopened an old post office box that Parker didn't know about. And in the evenings, I spent hours in my workshop, tightening hinges, repairing old tools, reacquainting myself with the rhythm of manual work. The smell of oil and sawdust reminded me I was still capable of creating something that couldn't be deleted with a password. Then Linda called one morning with news that made my blood run cold. "Tom," she said, "I've been digging into the property filings. There's a loan under your name secured against your house." My hand froze around the mug. A loan? I haven't borrowed a dime in years. "It was filed digitally through the Northline platform," she explained. "A business line of credit, $750,000. It lists your signature and Parker's co-authorization." I sat in silence, listening to the faint hum of static on the line. He used my house as collateral? "I'm afraid so," she said gently. "And technically he can. You gave him control." For a long time, I didn't speak. The anger wasn't fire this time. It was stones settling deep inside my chest. A week later, Parker showed up again, grinning like a salesman. He brought an expensive bottle of Bordeaux and a box of cigars I didn't smoke. "Thought we could celebrate, Dad," he said, setting everything on the table. "Market's turning around, and I'm putting us in a great position. You'll thank me later." I forced a smile. "I'm sure I will." Over dinner, he talked nonstop about liquidity opportunities and leveraged equity. I nodded at the right moments, playing the fool he thought I was. When he suggested another portfolio adjustment, I even pretended confusion. "Whatever you think's best, son." He grinned, satisfied. "See? That's why I handle these things. You just enjoy retirement." After he left, the mask cracked. I sat alone at the table, staring at the wine bottle he'd left behind. The word legacy glowed in gold letters across the label. Without thinking, I hurled it against the wall. Glass shattered, wine bleeding down the plaster like a wound. For a moment, I felt ashamed, an old man throwing tantrums in an empty house. But then, amid the mess, I realized something. He'd underestimated me. He thought I was finished, predictable, dependent. Maybe that was my advantage. I spent the rest of the night in the workshop. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of pine and rust. I found Grace's old notebook, her project ledger from when we built houses together. I opened to a clean page and wrote at the top, "Legacy audit ... Underneath, I began listing every detail I could remember, dates of calls, transaction numbers, phrases Parker had used. By the time I stopped, my handwriting filled 5 pages. He wanted to run my life like a business. Fine, I'd run my revenge like one. I closed the book and turned off the light, whispering into the dark. "If this is a game of numbers, son, you just made your first accounting error." If you're still following along, type number 4 below. The moment of truth is creeping closer, and one wrong move could change everything. The letter came on a Tuesday, folded neatly in an envelope stamped with the county seal. I almost tossed it in the pile with coupons and junk mail, but something about the official print caught my eye. When I opened it, the words blurred before I could finish the first line. Notice of property evaluation and rezoning request. My address, my house, listed in black ink as part of a redevelopment plan filed by Northline Development Group. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I called the number on the letter, my hands shaking. The clerk on the line was polite, almost cheerful. "Oh, yes, sir. The application was filed last week. It's for a proposed multi-unit residential redevelopment. You'll receive compensation once approval goes through. Compensation? I repeated. I'm not selling my house. Well, she said carefully, technically you already have. The property's held under Northline Holdings, and their representative authorized the request. My stomach turned cold. That representative is my son, I said quietly. I understand, sir. It's all public record. You're lucky, really. The buyout price looks very generous. Lucky, that word echoed in my ears as I hung up. I called Parker immediately. This time he answered. Hey, Dad. Busy morning, can we make this quick? You applied to rezone my land, I said. My voice was steady, but my pulse thundered in my ears. He sighed, as if I'd interrupted something trivial. It's just preliminary paperwork. Nothing's happening yet. You'll get a new place, maybe something modern. It's all part of the legacy project, remember? Legacy, I said, trying not to shout. You're erasing my life, Parker. Dad, you're being dramatic, he said. This house is falling apart. I'm helping you. You can't live in the past forever. I clenched the phone so hard my fingers ached. You don't get to decide where I live. You signed the trust. That means I manage assets, including property. I'm doing what's best for both of us. You'll thank me when it's done. He hung up before I could answer. The silence afterward felt heavier than any storm I'd ever worked through. That afternoon, I drove to the county clerk's office, a squat brick building that smelled like dust and bureaucracy. The woman at the front desk looked up politely when I explained why I was there. She led me to a computer terminal and pulled up the digital records. There it was, Reeves Village Development Proposal. My lot was marked as Phase 1, Primary Site Clearance. Under Lead Developer, it read, Parker Reeves. I stared at the screen, my throat closing. The clerk smiled sympathetically. You'll get a fair payout, sir. Northline always compensates above market rate. I left without replying. Outside, the wind whipped leaves across the parking lot, brittle and dry. My name was still on the mailbox back home, but on paper, I didn't own a damn thing. That evening, Linda came by. She didn't bother knocking, just stepped in, holding a folder like it was something toxic. I found something, she said, setting it on the table. You might want to sit down. Inside was a set of medical documents. The header read, Preliminary Cognitive Assessment, Thomas Reeves. The signature at the bottom was mine, but I'd never seen those papers before. Where did this come from? I asked, my voice low. Parker submitted it to the bank last month. It claims you've shown signs of cognitive decline, confusion, forgetfulness, impaired judgment. It's how he justified full trust control. I stared at the paper, the forged version of myself staring back. He forged this, I whispered. Yes, Linda said softly. And if you confront him directly, he can use this to declare you unfit. We need evidence, emails, records, witnesses. Otherwise, any fight you start, he'll finish. The room tilted. My son had planned everything. Not out of anger, but precision. To him, I wasn't a person anymore. I was a liability to be managed. After Linda left, I walked through the house. Every board, every dent, every nail had a memory. The mark on the kitchen counter from when Grace dropped her wedding ring. The uneven floorboard in the hall that creaked every night like a heartbeat. I touched the wall by the stairs, feeling the cool plaster beneath my hand. You don't see it, do you, boy? I whispered. This isn't an asset. It's a life. In the living room, a framed photo of Parker as a child sat on the mantel. His smile, missing 2 front teeth, glowed under the lamp. I smashed it against the hearth before I knew what I was doing. The glass shattered, scattering tiny reflections across the floor. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing hard, surrounded by the debris of my own patience. Then I sat down. Slowly, carefully, I picked up my notebook, the one labeled Legacy Audit. I opened to a fresh page and wrote a single line across the top. Phase 1, Exposure. My tears dried before the ink did. If Parker wanted to treat life like a transaction, then I'd answer in the only language he understood. Not rage, not pleading, documentation, proof. By the time night fell, the fire pit in my backyard glowed with a small flame. I dropped a photocopy of the forged report into it, watching the edges curl and blacken. Smoke rose into the autumn air, carrying the smell of burning lies. "You said I couldn't live without you," I murmured into the dark. "Let's see how you live when the foundation starts to crack." The fire hissed and died, but I didn't move. Somewhere beyond the trees, the wind carried the faint echo of Parker's words. You can't live in the past, maybe not, but I could sure as hell use the past to destroy his future. The morning after the fire, the house smelled like smoke and rain. I stood by the kitchen window, watching the faint curl of ash drift across the yard. The air felt cleaner somehow, lighter, as if burning that forged report had stripped away the last of my fear. Everything Parker had taken from me, my savings, my house, my dignity, was gone. But what he hadn't taken was my mind. He thought old age meant weakness. He was about to learn what experience really meant. Around 9, a knock came at the door. Ray Martinez stood there, holding 2 coffees. "Heard about the rezoning," he said, handing me one. "Words going around City Hall. Parker's making big moves." I nodded. "He's moving faster than I expected." Ray shook his head. "You can't fight him head on, Tom. The guy's got lawyers, investors, all the paperwork in his favor." "Then I won't fight him head on," I said quietly. "I'll build underneath him." Ray studied me for a moment, then gave a slow grin. "There's the man I remember. You say the word, I'm in." We sat on the porch for a while, drinking in silence. The sky was gray, the kind of color that reminded me of roof shingles before they caught sunlight. That used to be my world. Angles, layers, structure. Maybe that's what I needed again. Not anger, design. Later that afternoon, I drove to Linda's office. She had a stack of folders waiting on her desk. "You're not going to like this," she said. "I've traced a series of digital transactions, trust withdrawals routed through North Align's private accounts. It's proof that Parker's using your estate funds for his projects." I exhaled slowly. "That's something we can use?" She nodded. "If we present this with evidence of forged documentation, we can request a freeze order on the trust. It won't win the war, but it'll stop him from bleeding you dry." I rubbed my temples. "And the catch?" Her voice softened. "It'll go public, Tom. Your name, his company, everything. It's going to get ugly." For a moment, the thought made me sick. The whispers, the pitying headlines, elderly father versus financial heir. But then I thought about Grace, about the years we spent building this home with sweat and splinters. I'd rather be humiliated than erased. "Do it," I said finally. "I've been invisible long enough." She gave me a look somewhere between admiration and worry. "Then we'll make him visible for the wrong reasons." When I got home that night, there was another envelope in the mailbox. It was from the Department of Social Services. The letter said an anonymous concern report had been filed, recommending a mental health evaluation for possible cognitive decline. The line at the bottom made my stomach twist. Filed by P. Reeves, next of kin. My son was trying to have me declared incompetent. For a long time, I just stood in the driveway, the letter trembling in my hand. Then something in me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. He'd fired the first shot. Now it was my turn. I went into the workshop, the smell of cedar and motor oil wrapping around me like armor. Grace's hammer still hung on the pegboard, a relic from a time when I built homes instead of memories. I sat at my desk, opened the notebook labeled Legacy Audit, and stared at the 2 paths before me. 1. Play the victim, let him win, fade quietly into assisted living while Parker remodeled the ruins of my life. 2. Fight back, no matter the cost. I touched the hammer's worn handle, remembering Grace's words from years ago. Measure twice, cut once. Maybe revenge worked the same way. The choice wasn't hard anymore. No more running, I whispered. The next few days moved like clockwork. I gathered everything I could find. Old bank statements, building permits, even Grace's original will. On the second page, in her careful handwriting, it read, "The property shall remain under direct personal ownership of Thomas Reeves." That line, written 20 years ago, became my cornerstone. I took photos of every document, every signature. I even recorded a video on my flip phone, describing what Parker had done, naming names, dates, numbers. Each file went into a new folder in my workshop drawer, labeled Phase 2, Leverage. By Thursday, I'd assembled enough evidence to make Linda's eyes widen when I called her. "You're serious about this," she said. "Dead serious," I replied. "If Parker wants to play corporate, I'll show him what an old craftsman can do with a blueprint." That night, I sat on the porch again. The air was cool, stars scattered over the dark like nails on a black roof. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and spoke slowly. "My name is Thomas Reeves. I built this house with my own hands. My son believes I can't live without him. He's wrong. What I built can't be bought, and what he's stolen, I'm taking back." I pressed save. The screen flickered once, then went still. My reflection looked back at me from the window, half in light, half in shadow. The man staring back wasn't the tired father from a month ago. He was something sharper, leaner, alive again. Parker wanted control. What he'd created instead was his biggest mistake, giving me a reason to fight. 2 weeks after I made my choice, the first sign that Parker was losing control came from a knock at my door. Not Parker this time, but a courier. He handed me a thick envelope stamped by the county court. Inside was a single page with 12 bold words that made my hands tremble. Temporary suspension of fiduciary trust authority granted pending investigation. Linda had done it. The judge approved the freeze. Parker couldn't touch a cent of my assets until the court reviewed the case. For the first time in months, I exhaled without the weight of fear pressing on my chest. I stood in the yard, the wind brushing through the trees, and allowed myself to feel something dangerously close to relief. By that afternoon, the news spread. I didn't need to see the reports. My phone buzzed nonstop. Linda confirmed it herself. The business community knows. Parker's investors are panicking. It felt like justice at last, but deep down, I knew it was only the first crack in a dam that still held back a flood. Parker came storming into my house 2 days later, without knocking. His face was red, his voice already breaking before he spoke. "What the hell did you do?" I stayed seated at the kitchen table, calm, coffee cup in hand. I asked for an audit. "An audit?" he snapped. "You froze millions in assets. My employees are calling me non-stop. My board wants answers, and you," he jabbed his finger toward me, "you let that woman fill your head with garbage." "You mean Linda?" I said evenly. "She filled it with facts. There's a difference." He slammed his hand on the table, rattling the mug. "You're destroying everything I built." "No," I said quietly. "I'm protecting everything I built." "You just forgot whose name was on the deed." His jaw clenched. "You think this is over? You're old, Dad. You won't win. No court will believe you over me." "I don't need them to believe," I replied. "I just need them to see." He didn't answer. He just stood there for a long moment, seething, before turning for the door. When it slammed behind him, the frame cracked, a sharp splintering sound, like a bone breaking. I sat in silence, staring at the fracture in the wood. The next morning, I found my name in the paper. Wealth manager accused of exploiting father's estate. My photo was small, Parker's was large, his perfect smile, his expensive suit. Neighbors started calling. Some offered sympathy, others just whispered. I even got a call from a local reporter asking for my side of the story. I told her I'd let the documents speak for me. But the loneliness hit harder than I expected. The house, once my fortress, now echoed with silence. People avoided me in the diner. Some didn't want to choose sides, others had already chosen his. Then Linda called, her voice tight with frustration. "Tom, we've got a problem. Someone inside the courthouse leaked our filings to Northline." "What do you mean leaked?" "They know every document we submitted, the evidence list, the timeline, everything. Parker's firm paid off a clerk." For a long moment, I didn't speak. "So, he knows our hand?" "Yes," she said softly. "I'm sorry." I didn't see it coming. I closed my eyes. The small victory I'd tasted curdled into ash. "You didn't lose us the war, Linda. You just showed me how careful he's willing to be." That night, I reopened my notebook. Across the page, in thick black ink, I wrote, "Phase 3, Exposure." The next few days were heavy. I worked in the workshop but couldn't focus. The hum of the old lamp, the creak of the stool, all of it reminded me of how much smaller the world felt when you stood alone. I started to wonder if revenge was turning me into the same kind of man I despised. Cold, methodical, detached. Then I remembered the forged report with my name on it, and the pity in Parker's voice when he said I couldn't live without him. That thought burned away the doubt. Ray showed up again that weekend, arms full of groceries and his usual dry humor. "Figured I'd check on the town's most wanted man," he said, setting the bags down. I smiled faintly. "You heard about the leak." "Yeah. Parker's got money but no soul. Still, you're holding your own." "Standing's one thing," I said. "Winning's another." He leaned against the counter. "You remember when I overheard your boy bragging about streamlining Dad's assets at the hardware store?" "I'm ready to testify to that. Might not be much, but it's something." I nodded, writing his name in the ledger. Something's all I need. That night, after Ray left, I sat on the porch watching the sun drop behind the trees. The phone buzzed in my pocket. Voicemail from Parker. I didn't want to listen, but I pressed play anyway. "You've made your choice, old man," his voice said, cold and shaking with anger. "I hope you can live with it when they take everything from you." I deleted the message before it ended. The light was fading, the yard sinking into shadow. I looked out over the property, my walls, my roof, my memories, and whispered, "You already did, son." The wind picked up, carrying the faint creak of the cracked door inside. It sounded like the house was breathing with me, refusing to fall apart. Tomorrow I'd rebuild again. Only this time, I wouldn't be fixing shingles. I'd be fixing legacy. Morning light slipped through the crack in the front door, cutting a thin golden line across the floor. The split frame from Parker's outburst was still there, a scar running through the wood. I stood staring at it for a while before fetching my hammer and nails. The sound of metal striking wood echoed through the house, a slow, steady rhythm. Every tap felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The air smelled of sawdust and coffee. Revenge used to feel hot, sharp, like lightning. Now it felt cool, deliberate, like architecture. When Linda arrived that afternoon, she looked exhausted but hopeful. "The trust freeze is holding," she said, setting her files on the table. "And I've been thinking, there's another way. If we go public through a journalist, Parker can't bury it. Once it's on record, it's protected speech." I leaned back, rubbing my jaw. "You mean, make this a story?" "Yes," she said. "Parker used silence to control the narrative. You take that away, you take away his power." I thought about Grace, how she used to say that light was the best tool for finding truth in any build. "If sunlight kills parasites," I said, "then let's open every window." Linda smiled for the first time in weeks. That's the Tom I remember. We spent the rest of the afternoon outlining the plan. Linda would connect with a trusted local journalist. I'd prepare my own written statement, concise and factual. No anger, no theatrics, just truth. That night, Ray came over, carrying his old laptop and a six-pack. Heard you're going public, he said. About damn time. We cleared a space in the workshop and turned it into a command center. My evidence files, scanned receipts, legal forms, property deeds, covered the walls like blueprints. Ray labeled folders while I checked every document twice. He cracked jokes to fill the silence, and for the first time in a long while, I laughed. Around midnight, we stopped for coffee. You nervous? Ray asked. Not anymore, I said. He's been running this show too long. Time to remind him I built things that last. 2 days later, Parker beat us to it. He appeared on a local business podcast, smooth and smiling, voice dripping with sympathy. It's been a painful situation, he told the host. My father's confused. He's being manipulated by people who don't understand our family's dynamics. I just want what's best for him. I watched from my kitchen table, the screen light flickering against the dark window. Each word was a nail through my patience. He looked calm, reasonable, the perfect son. And online, people believed him. Poor old man, one comment read. So sad when dementia sets in. I closed the laptop. When Ray came by later, I showed him the clip. He cursed under his breath. He's good at this. Let him talk, I said quietly. The louder he lies, the clearer the truth will sound when I speak. The next morning, Linda set up a camera in her office. She wanted authenticity, no script, no edits, just me. I sat facing the lens, the notebook open on my lap. My name is Thomas Reeves, I began. I'm not confused. I'm not helpless. I am a builder. I spent 40 years creating homes that stood through storms. My son forgot who taught him to build. He forged my name, took my house, and called it protection. I trusted him because that's what fathers do. But trust doesn't mean surrender. Linda ended the recording, tears shining in her eyes. That was perfect. The video went online that evening. By morning, it had been shared thousands of times. Messages flooded in, people telling their own stories of being manipulated by family, of losing everything to someone they loved. For the first time, I wasn't alone. The workshop transformed again. The walls were lined with printed emails of support, letters from strangers thanking me for speaking up. I realized then this fight wasn't just about my house. It was about every parent whose love had been turned into a weapon against them. That night, I fixed the door completely, sanding it smooth and brushing on a fresh coat of paint. The crack was still visible if you knew where to look, but the frame held firm. I sat beside it with my ledger and wrote, Phase 4, Reckoning. Looking at Grace's photo on the shelf, I whispered, You were right. I gave him too much. Now I'll take back what's mine and what you built. Outside, the porch light glowed against the darkness. Inside, the house felt whole again. Not perfect, not untouched, but strong, like me. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and nervous sweat. Reporters crowded the hallway, cameras flashing like lightning before a storm. I walked through them slowly, each step measured, each breath steady. My suit was simple, navy blue, pressed the night before by my own hands. It wasn't about looking powerful. It was about showing that I hadn't broken. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispered speculation. Parker sat across the aisle, immaculate in a tailored gray suit, but his eyes betrayed the truth. Bloodshot, restless, hollow. He glanced up once when I entered. For a split second, I saw the boy I'd taught to throw a baseball. Then the mask returned. The judge called us to order. Linda began her presentation with quiet precision. Your Honor, this case isn't about inheritance. It's about trust, betrayed, manipulated, and exploited. She laid out the first folder, copies of property transfers, forged e-signatures, tax filings that traced Parker's web of control. Each page landed like a hammer against his defense. Parker's lawyer, a slick young man in a $1,000 suit, rose to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. My client's father is clearly suffering cognitive decline. These supposed signatures are his own, Linda interrupted, verified by state forensics. The objection died. The lawyer's smile faltered. Then came Ray's turn. He stood, a little awkward in his borrowed tie, clearing his throat. "Name's Raymond Carter," he said. "Been Tom's friend 30 years. About a month ago, I overheard Parker bragging at a bar in Columbus. Said he was streamlining Dad's assets before the old man croaks." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Parker's face went pale, his jaw tightening. The judge rapped her gavel. "Order in the court." Parker's lawyer leaned in, whispering something frantic, but it was too late. The damage was done. When Parker finally took the stand, he looked polished again, collected. "I was trying to protect my father," he said, voice measured. "He was becoming reckless, signing papers he didn't understand. I handled things as any responsible sin would." Linda didn't flinch. "So, you forged his signature? Shifted assets into your own name? Transferred his home into a company registered to you?" Parker's nostrils flared. "I did what was necessary to protect him from himself." Linda pressed play on a recording, the voicemail Parker had left after our fight. "You've made your choice, old man. I hope you can live with it." The room went silent. Even the air seemed to freeze. The judge glanced toward Parker, unimpressed. "Mr. Reeves, would you care to explain that?" Parker stammered something about frustration and taken out of context, but his voice cracked. The jurors exchanged glances. During the recess, Parker approached me in the hallway, fury trembling beneath his practiced calm. "You think you've won? You've ruined me." I looked at him for a long time. "No, son. You ruined yourself the day you decided my worth ended when my wallet did." For the first time, his expression softened. Not guilt, but fear. He opened his mouth, then turned and walked away. When court resumed, the journalist who'd aired my video stood up from the back row. "Your Honor," she said, "I have material evidence of attempted witness tampering." She produced her phone, scrolling through emails, messages from Parker offering a generous settlement if she withdrew her report. The judge's face hardened. Parker's lawyer whispered something and then quietly gathered his briefcase. "Your Honor," he said, "I must recuse myself. Ethical conflict." The judge nodded. "Noted." 10 minutes later, she delivered the ruling. Parker was found liable for fraud, forgery, and elder financial exploitation. Control of all joint assets returned to me. Criminal charges were referred to the state attorney's office. The cameras outside waited for a reaction, microphones thrust forward. "What do you have to say, Mr. Reeves?" one reporter asked. I straightened my jacket. "I didn't destroy my son," I said. "I just stopped letting him destroy me." The words hung in the crisp autumn air like final nails in a coffin. As Parker was led away by 2 officers, he didn't look back. I watched the door close behind him and felt neither triumph nor sorrow, just silence, vast and clean. Outside, Linda and Ray waited on the courthouse steps. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the marble stairs. Some storms don't pass, I thought. They clear the air. And for the first time in years, I could breathe. 3 weeks after the verdict, my workshop smelled like home again. Wood shavings, varnish, and sunlight. The windows were spotless, the benches lined with clean tools. I ran my hand along the smooth grain of an oak desk I was finishing for the local community center. The sound of the sander was soft, steady, almost meditative. For the first time in years, I was building something that wasn't meant to impress anyone, just to be useful. Linda and Ray showed up around noon, as they always did now, carrying coffee and an envelope. "You've officially been approved for whistleblower compensation," Linda said, her smile wide but tired. "The amount's enough to retire twice over." I laughed quietly. I already tried that once. Didn't go so well. Ray pulled out a folded flyer from his jacket pocket. "We've been talking," he said. "There are a lot of older folks getting taken advantage of, people who don't even know what's happening. What if we start something, local, Something that helps them before they end up in court? Linda nodded. We can call it the Grace Project, she said softly. After your wife. I looked at her for a long moment, the name settling over me like a benediction. Grace would have loved it, helping others, turning something broken into something that mattered. The Grace Project, I said, tasting the words. Let's build it. The next morning, a letter arrived with the county jail's return address. The handwriting stopped me cold. Parker's. The paper trembled slightly in my hands as I opened it. Dad, it began. I know you don't owe me a response. I've had time to think in here, and I see now what I became. You built things that lasted, and I built walls made of glass. I told myself I was protecting you, but really, I was protecting my ego. You were right about what matters. I just learned it too late. The words cut deep, not because they hurt, but because they sounded like a man I'd once known. A boy, really, my boy. I folded the letter neatly, placed it in my drawer beside Grace's photo, and didn't reply. Some lessons only hold their meaning in silence. The following week, Linda introduced me to a small group of retirees and widows at the library. We sat in a circle of folding chairs, our hands resting on coffee cups and court forms. I told them my story, not as a tragedy, but as a warning. I showed them how to protect their assets, how to read fine print, how to say no even when the person asking is family. A woman named Evelyn wiped her eyes as I finished. You make it sound possible again, she said. It is, I told her. You just have to remember who you were before they made you doubt it. That night, I walked down to the riverbank, the one where Grace and I used to watch sunsets. The water was calm, reflecting the orange sky. I carried a handful of sawdust from the new desk and let it drift into the current. For every piece they tried to take, I whispered, I built another. The current carried it away, tiny flecks of gold turning to light. A few days later, a young couple came to my workshop. The man shook my hand, his grip firm but respectful. Mr. Reeves, he said, I'm Ethan Parker. My dad says you built the house he grew up in. We just bought it and want to restore it right. For a second, the name caught me off guard, but his eyes were kind, sincere. I smiled. Then let's make sure it stands another 50 years. We spread blueprints across the bench as sunlight poured in through the windows. As we worked, I realized the circle was complete. Parker had tried to erase my name, my work, my dignity. But here I was, still building, still teaching, still standing. You can lose everything, money, pride, even family. But if you keep your craft, your purpose, your name, you can build again. The light shifted, warm and golden, painting the walls of the workshop like a new beginning. I could almost hear Grace's laugh in the wind outside, soft and certain. I picked up my chisel, set it against the wood, and smiled. Let's get back to work. These turning points remind us that setting boundaries and valuing ourselves is not just an act of courage, it's the foundation of living with dignity. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What's one lesson from this story that you feel connected to, and how will you apply it in your own life? Let's grow together by sharing our thoughts. If this story resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, feel free to leave a 0. Your feedback helps us improve. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and spark reflection. Thank you for watching, and here's to living life with strength, honesty, and authenticity.